Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It started innocently enough. I was in my early 30s, married for 6 years, and settled into what most would call a comfortable life. My husband, Daniel, is a good man, steady kind, the type you build a home and future with. But as the years wore on, our relationship became more routine than romance, more partnership than passion. I missed feeling curious, alive, challenged. I missed the version of myself who asked questions, craved knowledge, and stayed up late just to learn. Something new. So my company offered a weekend creative writing workshop to its employees. I signed up without a second thought. That's where I met Julian. He was the workshop instructor, late 40s. Charismatic, with a worn leather satchel and a voice like a quiet storm. He had published 2 novels and spoke with the kind of intensity that made everyone in the room hang on to his every word. Including me. At first, it was purely professional. I admired his work, respected his feedback, and felt grateful to learn from someone so accomplished. He took a particular interest in my writing, often asking me to stay after class for extra feedback. We'd discuss character arcs, symbolism, and story structure. He made me feel seen not just as a writer, but as a woman who still had potential, depth, and passion. That was the first line I crossed. The second came a week later when I emailed him late at night, not about writing, but about a dream I had involving a story idea. His reply came back at 2 a.m., thoughtful and layered with subtle compliments. Our email exchanges grew more personal. He told me I had a rare sensitivity, that my writing was sensual, and that he looked forward to our sessions more than he should. Told myself it was just admiration, that nothing would happen. But something was happening. The next time we met at the cafe near the workshop venue, we sat closer. His hand brushed mine when he handed back my marked up pages. He lingered. I didn't move away. There was no kiss, no overt flirtation, but the air between us was electric charged with everything we weren't saying. At home, I was a different person. Quiet, distracted, almost guilty. I told Daniel I was stressed from work. He believed me. He always believed me. Julian and I began texting daily. At first, we shared writing prompts, then jokes, then late-night confessions. He told me his marriage had grown cold. I said nothing about mine, but he knew. He read between every line I wrote. Eventually, he invited me to a private writing retreat a weekend in the mountains, just the 2 of us, under the guise of focused writing and mentorship. I told myself I wouldn't go, but I did. The cabin was quiet, surrounded by trees and snow. He poured wine. We wrote by the fireplace. And that night, when he read a passage I'd written about forbidden's love, he looked at me for a long time before saying, "You're not writing fiction." I didn't deny it. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, like we both knew we were crossing a point of no return. And then it wasn't soft. Then it was desperate, raw, unforgivable. We spent the night together, and the next day, and the next. It wasn't just sex. It was something deeper, a connection I'd forgotten I was capable of. I felt powerful, beautiful, wanted, but by the time I drove home, reality had sunk its claws back in. I sat in the car for an hour before walking into the house. Daniel greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and asked about the retreat. I told him it was fine, that we wrote a lot. I wish I could say that was the end. That guilt stopped me. But it didn't. Julian and I kept seeing each other for another 3 months. Secret meetings, hotel rooms, and late-night calls when I said I was working late. But the lie wore me down. It consumed everything, my appetite, my peace, my ability to look Daniel in the eyes. I started resenting Julian, too. The affair had once felt like freedom, but now it felt like a trap, like I was standing in the ruins of something I once called self-discovery. The final straw came when Daniel found one of our text exchanges on my laptop. I had forgotten to sign out of my email. He didn't scream. He didn't accuse. He just looked at me with a kind of broken silence I'll never forget. "What was I not giving you?" he asked, and I had no answer. because it wasn't about him. It was about me. About a woman who wanted to feel something again, and who mistook passion for purpose. The fallout was brutal. Therapy, tears, weeks of sleeping in separate rooms. Julian tried to reach out, but I cut him off. It was the only decent thing I could do. Daniel and I are still together barely. Rebuilding trust is a long, slow process. Some days I think we'll make it. Other days, I wonder if I ruined us for good. I wanted to learn, but I crossed the line, and now I know that some lessons cost more than you can ever repay. After everything came out, the days blurred together. Silence became our language, heavy, suffocating silence that filled the rooms like fog. Daniel didn't yell, he didn't throw things or demand answers. That almost made it worse. His stillness, his restraint, it was like watching a tree snap under the weight of invisible wind. I kept trying to speak, to explain, but there was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound pathetic or selfish. I moved into the guest room. That first night, lying alone in the unfamiliar bed, I stared at the ceiling and waited to cry. But the tears didn't come, not yet. I wasn't numb. I was something worse, awake. Hyper aware of everything I had destroyed. I still had to go to work. I still had to smile at coworkers, respond to emails, and carry on as if I wasn't falling apart. But every hour was a countdown to when I'd come home and be confronted again by what I'd done. The life I had dismantled, piece by piece, for something that never had a future. Julian emailed me once more. Just once. The subject line was, "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a long time. I never opened it, never replied. I didn't delete it either. That felt too easy. Daniel eventually agreed to couples therapy. The sessions were hard. Some days we left angrier than when we arrived. Other days, we sat in stunned silence while the therapist waited for one of us to admit the obvious truth, that love alone isn't always enough, that two people can share a house, a bed, a life, and still not know how to reach each other when it counts. He asked questions I had no answers for. Was it just physical? Did you love him? Was I not enough? I told him the truth as best I could, that I didn't love Julian, that I wasn't even sure I liked him, that it wasn't about sex. It was about feeling like me again, like someone who still had something left to discover, someone who mattered. It was a horrible thing to say, but lies had done enough damage already. We tried to reconnect. We cooked dinner together once, and it felt almost normal until I picked up a knife he'd used and instinctively said, "Julian slices onions the same way." The silence after that was a cavern neither of us could climb out of. The hardest part wasn't his anger. It was his grief, his disappointment. I saw it in the way he moved around me, like I was a memory he was trying not to touch. He didn't look at me the same way anymore, and I hated that. I missed his eyes, not just their color or the way they crinkled when he smiled, but the trust in them, the warmth, the quiet kind of love you only earn after years of showing up. Again and again, even when things are boring or hard, I missed us. But I wasn't sure if us still existed. Eventually, he told me he needed time away. He stayed with his brother for 2 weeks. During that time, the house was eerily quiet. I kept expecting to feel free, but all I felt was hollow. Every room echoed. Every mirror reflected someone I didn't fully recognize. I started journaling again. Not for anyone, not for class or feedback. Just for me. I wrote pages about my childhood, about my marriage, about how easy it is to lose yourself when you stop checking in with your own heart, about how the thrill of something new can seduce you into believing it's a cure, when it's really just a distraction from deeper wounds. When Daniel came back, he looked different. Not colder, but more distant. Like someone who had visited a darker place and wasn't quite ready to step back into the light. We talked more, sometimes late into the night. We talked about forgiveness and how it's not the same as forgetting. We talked about rebuilding and how hard it is to trust someone who's already broken a sacred promise. There are moments now when things feel close to okay. When we laugh at something stupid on TV, His hand brushes mine as we pass each other in the kitchen, and neither of us pulls away. And then there are other moments, quiet, sobering ones, when I see him staring at the floor, lost in a thought he won't share. And I know he's remembering. I still don't know where this story ends. Maybe we'll make it. Maybe we won't. Maybe we're learning how to carry something broken without cutting ourselves on the sharp edges. Or maybe we're just delaying the inevitable. But I know this much. Infidelity doesn't begin with sex. It begins with a conversation you shouldn't have. With a door left slightly open. With a need you don't acknowledge until it's too late. I opened that door. I walked through it, and I hurt the person who trusted me the most. That truth will always live with me, even if he chooses to stay. And even if we find a way forward, I will never again confuse attention with love or curiosity with permission. I will never again mistake a detour for a destination. I wanted to learn, but I crossed the line, and the cost of that lesson is a scar I will carry for the rest of my life. Time passed, as it always does. At first, everything was measured in days, then weeks. Eventually, it became months since the truth came out. But time didn't heal things the way people say it does. It didn't dull the pain so much as it taught me how to live around it, like a stone in your shoe that you eventually stop noticing. Even though it's still there. Daniel and I continued therapy. Not because we had all the answers, but because we didn't. The sessions shifted over time. They became less about what happened and more about what was left, what was worth saving. There were no guarantees, just slow steps, tiny victories. A smile here, a shared coffee without tension there. Some days we barely spoke. Other days, one of us would say something that cracked us both open and left us raw again. I started volunteering at a local community center teaching creative writing to teenagers. It wasn't planned. I stumbled into it after overhearing someone in a bookstore talking about needing a last-minute fill-in. Something in me just responded. I thought I was done with writing, maybe forever. But when I walked into that classroom filled with wide-eyed kids with notebooks and dreams, I felt something shift. They didn't know about my past. They didn't care. They just wanted to be heard, to be understood. And in helping them find their voices, I slowly began finding mine again. Not the voice I used to impress people. Not the one that flirted with danger or craved attention, but something quieter, more honest. Something I hadn't heard from myself in years. One night, I came home late from the community center. Daniel was already in bed, reading. I hesitated in the doorway. Then I said, I think I'm starting to feel like myself again. He looked up at me. His face didn't change, not much, but I saw something flicker behind his eyes' recognition. Maybe, or hope. Good, he said softly. I've missed her. We didn't hug. We didn't fall into each other's arms like a movie scene, but I walked to the edge of the bed and sat down. And for a long time, we just sat there in the same quiet space, not fixing anything, not rushing forward, just being in the moment together. And that, in its own strange way, felt like progress. Eventually, we started sleeping in the same bed again. At first, it was just sleep. No touching, no expectations, just the shared space. I would lie awake sometimes and listen to his breathing. I wondered what he dreamed about, if I still appeared in his dreams, and if I did, what version of me was there. There are things you don't realize about betrayal until you're on the inside of it. Like how it doesn't just affect the person. You heard it also changes you. It makes you question everything. Why you did what you did. What you thought was missing. Whether you're even capable of being the person someone else can trust again. I stopped wearing my wedding ring for a while. Not because Daniel asked me to, but because I didn't feel like I deserved to. I kept it in the small wooden box on my dresser next to an old photo of us on our honeymoon. One day, months later, I put it back on. Quietly, without ceremony. Daniel noticed, but he didn't say anything. He just reached out that night and took my hand while we lay in bed. That simple gesture said more than any speech ever could. We never spoke about Julian again. There was no need. That chapter had closed in its own painful way. He became a shadow part of a past I couldn't erase, but one I refused to revisit. I sometimes wondered what he thought of it all. If he felt guilt, regret, or simply moved on untouched. But I no longer reached for those answers. They weren't mine to carry anymore. Daniel and I aren't what we were. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. The marriage we had before was built on comfort, yes, but also on assumptions and unspoken disappointments. The one we are slowly building, now day by day, piece by fragile piece, is grounded in brutal honesty. In choice, we choose each other. Now, consciously, not because it's easy, not because it's perfect, but because there's something sacred in choosing to stay, to rebuild. When leaving would be simpler, forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. And love, I've come to learn, is less about passion and more about patience. Less about grand gestures and more about tiny acts of showing up again and again. Even when it's hard, I still write. I still teach. I still have days where I look in the mirror and remember the version of me I don't want to be again. But I also see a woman who is learning, still flawed, still healing, but no longer running from herself. And Daniel? He's still here. He still reaches for my hand in the dark. And sometimes he smiles like he used to. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for, not a perfect ending, but a second beginning. The seasons changed. Summer faded into fall and the leaves outside our house turned from green to gold, then brown. Somehow it felt symbolic. A quiet dying off of the past. Or maybe just nature's way of reminding me that change is constant, inevitable even when it hurts. I stopped keeping track of how many months had passed since the affair ended. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't want my life to be measured by the day everything broke. I wanted to stop defining myself by that moment of weakness, of disconnection, of reckless hunger for something I couldn't even name. And yet it lingered. The memory didn't fade. It didn't visit me every day, but it waited quietly, like an old bruise that still aches when touched. Sometimes it came in the form of a dream where I'd find myself back in that cabin, watching myself from a distance. As I made decisions, I couldn't stop. Other times, it came when Daniel would glance at his phone, and I'd wonder if he was watching me, not with suspicion, but with quiet pain he didn't want to voice. Trust, I've learned, doesn't break. Like glass, it unravels like fabric, slowly, stitch by stitch. And if you're lucky, if you're both willing, you can try to weave it back together. But the pattern will never be the same. One night, during dinner, Daniel said something I didn't expect. We were eating quietly, no music, no distractions, just the sound of silverware and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. He looked up at me and said, "Do you think you've forgiven yourself?" I froze, not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I hadn't expected him to ask. I put my fork down, unsure of how to answer. "I'm trying," I said after a long pause. Some days I think I have. Other days I catch myself rewriting the past in my head, trying to find the exact moment I could have turned back. And I hate myself all over again. He nodded slowly. "I've done that too." That stunned me. I hadn't realized he also played the what if game. What if he had noticed I was drifting? What if he had said something sooner? What if he had touched me more, held me more, asked me how I really was? We were both haunted, not just by what happened, but by what didn't. And yet in that moment, we were more honest with each other than we had been in years. No defensiveness, no blame. Just two people sitting at a table with the ghost of everything they'd lost trying. Still to find their way back. Around the holidays, we took a short trip together. Just a weekend in a quiet coastal town where we used to go before things got complicated. It was simple long walks on the beach, shared breakfasts in silence, the occasional touch that felt like a question. Are we okay? Are we still us? On the second night, we sat outside watching the waves. It was cold and I leaned into him. He let me. I rested my head on his shoulder and whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. His response was quiet but steady. I thought about it a lot. But in the end, I remembered who you are, not what you did. And I wanted to believe that woman was still in there. I cried that night, not loudly, not for show, just quiet tears. Hidden in his coat, while the sea whispered in the distance and the moon lit the water like silver dot, it's not a fairy tale. We didn't get back to normal. I don't even believe in normal anymore. What we have now is something different. Something worn, weathered, but strong. There's a rawness to it. A vulnerability we used to avoid. We talk more. We ask questions. We check in not out of fear, but out of care. And sometimes when we make love, it's like we're relearning each other, not just the physical, but the emotional contours of who we are now. It's not about passion alone. It's about closeness. Real intimacy forged in fire. I still wear the scar of what I did. I probably always will. But I don't let it define me. And Daniel, in his quiet way, taught me something I hadn't expected. That love isn't just about choosing someone when they're good and kind and whole. Sometimes it's about choosing them even when they're broken, even when they've broken you, and sometimes it's about choosing yourself, not the version that gave into weakness, but the version that came out the other side. Stronger, wiser, more human, maybe. In the end, I did learn something after all, not from Julian. Not from the affair, but from the long, aching road back to myself, and from the man who walked beside me, even when he had every reason to walk away.